Good morning, everybody. Welcome. We begin today a new series on the concept of free choice in life. And this is part one of the series. Next Sunday, I'm out of town, so there will not be a shir. Please share with family or friends who often come that next Sunday there's no shir, but we resume the Sunday afterwards. So next week, no. The Sunday after, yes. They tell the anecdote about this guy who would walk into the bar in the evening and order a glass of Crown Royal, say l'chaim, down it, take the glass, and throw it at the bartender's face. The first time, the bartender looks at him, he says, "What's this?" He says, "I'm so sorry. I suffer from terrible anger internally, and I'm very embarrassed. I have absolutely no control, and I am so ashamed of my behavior." He says, "Okay, I forgive you." Next night he comes back, orders a glass of whiskey, downs it, and guess what? Trach, right at his face. The poor man is bleeding, he's scratched. What now? "I'm so embarrassed. My mother was an alcoholic. My father was an addictive gambler. I grew up in a dysfunctional home. I've this terrible rage and fury in me." "Okay, I forgive you." The next night he comes, downs the glass, takes the glass, throws it in his face. "What now?" He says, "I'm so ashamed of myself. I hate myself. I can't stand myself. I just desire in me, this venom that I have, uncontrollable." He says, "Listen, if you don't want me to call the police, you have to promise that you're going to go into therapy. If you promise me you go to therapy, I don't want to see you here for 9 months. You need extensive therapy and healing. Then you can come back, I'll let you go." He says, "Okay, I will." He comes back 9 months later, takes a drink, l'chaim, downs the drink, takes the big glass and throws it right at the bartender's face. He says, "What now?" He says, "I went to therapy and now I'm not embarrassed anymore." The question is well known, and it's what motivates a discussion during these weeks of Parsha Shmois, Va'era, Boi, B'Shalach, and it's a very simple and obvious question that was already raised by the Rishonim. And the question is, how can God hold Paroi or the Egyptians accountable when he was the one who decreed that the Jewish people will be enslaved and subjugated and oppressed under that empire? In Parshas Lech Lecha, he told Avram Avinu clearly that the Jewish people, Vayom Avram Yodoya Teda Kigei years Aracha Beretz Leila and Avodim Ve'inu Eisam Arba Meis Shana. Your children will be foreigners in a country that is not theirs, where they will be enslaved and oppressed for 400 years. So if this was a decree that God told Avram hundreds of years before the Egyptian exile, how can you hold them accountable? The Rambam raises this question, Maimonides in Hilchos Tshuva, Perek Hey, the 5th chapter of the laws of repentance, and the Rambam's answer famously is, the Rebbeinu Shalom never said whom. He never told a particular Egyptian, you have to oppress the Jew. He never instructed a particular king to oppress the Jew. This was a general decree on the nation, not on an individual, and therefore every individual who participated holds responsibility, is accountable. The Rambam's perspective. Derive, Rabbi Avraham ben David criticizes the Rambam right there very heavily, and he says, please, if no individual does it, it can't happen. Nations are made of individuals. If everybody says, not me, somebody says, I'm the guy, I'm the one. That's the Derive doesn't agree with the Rambam. His perspective, just like the Ramban's perspective, Rabbeinu Moshe ben Nachman in Bereshis and Lech Lecha is, God wanted the Jews to be slaves. But the Egyptians made sure to add some more torture, some more suffering. It's the extras. It's the extra credit for which they're being punished. The Oirachayim, Rabbeinu Chaim ben Otter in Chumash Bereshis, his answer is very different and quite straightforward. He says, of course God decreed it. But I ask you a question. They oppressed the Jews in order to fulfill God's decree? Or they oppressed the Jews because they were finsted on to submitting? They oppressed the Jews because they were so loyal to the instructions of God, or they oppressed the Jews because they despised them, they hated them. You know, they asked the famous question about the song of Chad Gadya. At the end of the Seder, we sing Chad Gadya, right? What happens in Chad Gadya? You remember how it goes? You have to remind me. I'm not drunk with the 4 cases yet. I remember Chad Gadya. You have a goat. Right? Chad Gadya, a lovely, cute goat that the Zayda, the father, bought betrays us. It's mamash b'Yerushim, Doris, and you're never going to give up this goat. What happens? Huh? Who comes? The Asashunra. The cat comes. What does he do? Right? He damages, he hurts, he maims the goat, bites the goat. So who's the guilty one? The cat. Who's the innocent one? The goat. The goat was just roaming around the wilderness of Muncie, and this cat came and bit it. So the cat is obviously in the wrong. Now the door comes and gives a frask to the cat. Acaba. So who's in the right? The dog. Right. Huh? No, the cat harmed the innocent goat. Right? The dog now takes on the cause of the poor goat. So the dog is the tzaddik and the cat is the Rosh. What happens next? The stick. The stick now strikes the dog. So the one who strikes the dog is the guilty one. What happens next? The fire, right? Huh? So the fire that burns the stick is innocent. Right? Because the stick hurt the goat. So the fire is innocent. Now the water that extinguishes the fire is what? Is the bad guy. Right? Who drinks the water? Huh? The ox is the innocent one. Okay? So the sheichet who slaughters the ox is the guilty one. So the malach hamaves who kills the guy who slaughtered the ox is in the right. Now what's the last one? The Malach HaMavis is in the right. Now the Rebbeinu Shalom God who comes to the Malach HaMavis. So let's quote the words of Avraham Avinu, HaShoifet Chalaretz Le'asa Mishpat. Will the judge of the whole world be unjust? It comes out L'chaira, the creator of the world, so to speak, is in the wrong, Chas v'sholom. How do you explain this? You never had this question on Chad Gadya, huh? So next time, think what you say. So there are many answers. Reb Nosson Adler, the famous Rebbe of the Chassam Sofer, reportedly answered, he said, all your calculations are right, but let me just tell you, your mistake was in the beginning. The goat was innocent, and the cat was cruel. True. But the dog didn't come to damage the cat because the dog cares about the goat. The dog saw an opportunity for blood. The dog saw an opportunity for a bite. The dog jumped on the situation. Very often you have people who enter into disputes and fights, and with glee, they make sure to bark, to bite, to maim, to insult, to denigrate. Ostensibly, they're defending the flag of truth, justice, God, whatever it may be. But the reason they happen to be here has nothing to do with truth or justice. They somehow appreciate and love the fight. That's the Or HaChaim's perspective. He says, don't give me mices that the Egyptians are doing God's will. The Egyptians despise the Jews, and their act of genocide had nothing to do with justice, with sensitivity, with respect, and that's why they're being punished. The Or HaChaim's perspective. But this brings us to a much larger question, and that is, granted Parai and the Egyptians, we can rest assured that they were being punished in Parshas Va'era not in vain. They weren't as innocent as some of the newspapers portrayed them. But let's extend this question on all of history, on all of humanity, on all of civilization, and really every single person sitting here in this room. And it's one of the great questions of life. Do we have free choice about anything? There was a famous Yiddish writer who won the Nobel Prize in the 70s, Yitzchak Bashevis Zinger, Isaac Bashevis Zinger, who once quipped and says, we have to believe that we have free choice. We got no choice. But do we have free choice? And the question is an important one. It's specific, it's collective, it relates to us collectively and individually. Let me ask you a question. Did you have free choice whether to come to the shiur this morning? And the friend who you called and you asked to come with them and they said, no, I gotta go shopping. Did they have free choice not to come to the shiur? Well, I guess there's a lavish breakfast that Reb Nuchi prepared, so maybe you didn't have free choice whether to come to the shiur. You were compelled to come to the shiur because you would never get such a breakfast in your house. Do people really have free choice? Some of you have children, teenagers. They turn out, different children turn out very different ways. Do they really have free choice? Did each of those children or youngsters decide freely their path in life? Is there anything really about which we have free choice? Whom we marry, what we do for a living, what we believe, how we behave? Are we happy, depressed, motivated, paralyzed, ambitious, passive? They say there are three types of people. Some people make things happen, some people watch things happen, and some people you have to tell them that something happened. Do we have free choice about that? I mean, it seems that the great influences on each of us is a combination of our genetic makeup and our environment, nature and nurture. Do I choose who my mother is going to be, who my father is going to be, who my teacher is going to be, which community I'm going to grow up in, who will be the great influences on my life? We have no choice about that. Do I choose whether to be born a man or a woman, a Jew or a non-Jew? Do I choose to be born? Has anybody here chosen to have been born? So obviously about some things there's no choice. But the question is there anything that we have free choice? And why do you decide to go this way and I decide to go this way? Well, one guy was lazy this morning, another guy wasn't lazy this morning. One guy wanted to get out of the house, one guy didn't want to get out of the house. Was it really choice? Why do you want to get out of your house? You don't want to get out of your house. Oh, that depends on somebody else in the house. Is there really anything that we have free choice? Philosophers debated this, theologians debated this, scientists debated this and still debate it, physicists debate it, and of course psychologists debate it. You know the guy who's in therapy for 20 years and then he goes to Bahamas on a vacation because it's pretty cold in New York these days. And he writes a postcard from the Bahamas to his therapist. I'm here in the Bahamas and I'm having an unbelievable, awesome time and I wish you were here to tell me why. Are we masters over the why? Over the internal compositions, chemical makeups, DNA, and genetics which determine our mental, psychological, emotional, spiritual, and thus physical states at every single moment? The question is not just a scientific one, it's also a very religious question. If God is the master of the universe, at what point is he not the master and I become the master, you become the master? If our life every moment is generated and created from the divine energy, including our thought process, including our emotional process, where is that border where God's all-encompassing reality ceases to exist and you and I emerge as autonomous people? Is there such a border? Is it a delusion? Is it an absolute dream that we have free choice? It's an impossibility. It's just convenient to say we choose nothing. We make believe we choose. Is that the case? Some argue that way, some argue the other way. This is the topic we want to discuss. And I'm not jealous of myself that I have to deliver on this one. And we'll see where this takes us. Do I have a choice? There was this guy, a criminal. So he wasn't tried in court. He gets up and he tells the judge, listen, we know that Ein Oid Movadai. He pulled out that card. You never heard that one before. We know that there's nothing outside of God. You think I chose to do it? Do you think my ego is so large that I even thought for a moment I made a choice? It was all predetermined by God, by genes, by environment. Nothing to do with me. The judge looked at him and he said, I totally agree with you. You will be sentenced to 35 years in prison, and don't you think that it's my decision at all? It's not my choice, it's not my thinking. It's completely predetermined that you will end up in that place. We'll begin the discussion with one of the great questions that occupied the philosophers during the medieval times over many centuries. And those who are even scantily familiar with the works of Chachmei Yisrael, Choikre Yisrael, meaning Jewish philosophers, have certainly ran into this question, to this dilemma, to this struggle, and to this debate. It's known in Hebrew as the question of Yediyah and Bechira, meaning divine knowledge versus human free choice. Because for the philosophers in the Middle Ages, the great contradiction to free choice was not so much genetics and nature as it is today, which we will get to. For them, the main problem was a religious and a theological one. And the problem is formulated simply. If God knows in advance everything that I am going to do, and we assume that God's knowledge is accurate and perfect, so when tomorrow comes and I have to make that choice, is it possible for me to now to choose freely in one way or another way and not disprove God's authentic and accurate knowledge? If God's knowledge is perfect and accurate, I am compelled to implement the path that will confirm his knowledge. So one has to choose seemingly between the two. Either one says God does not know what's going to happen in the future, because I don't know what you're going to do tomorrow. I don't compel you. He doesn't know. He doesn't compel us, and I can freely choose. He may know afterwards what I did, but not before. Or I assume, no, he knows exactly what I'm going to do, and therefore when the next day or the next year or the next century comes, I am compelled to follow that path. And throughout the ages, there were philosophers who took different sides. Many of the Greek philosophers, Chachmei Yavan, gave human beings free choice and therefore said God can't really know. Many of the Chachmei Yishmael, Islamic religious scholars, because once upon a time, the great philosophers were born from Islam, emerged from Islam, as the Rambam discusses in various places. They often advocated the other side. We don't really have free choice. God knows, and we follow a script, even if we think we're not following the script, we're following our own choices. Surprisingly to some, the question in Judaism is first raised not in a work of Jewish philosophy or Kabbalah, Chakira, but rather in Mishnayos itself, in Mishnah. Where? Pirkei Avos, in the ethics of the fathers. And it's your source number 1, Pirkei Avos, Perek Gimel, Mishnah Tesvav. Who is the author of this Mishnah? None other than Rabbi Akiva. And right after the Mishnah, the previous Mishnah, Rabbi Akiva speaks about the greatness of the human being created in God's image. Chaviv Adam Shenivra B'Tsalem, the same Rabbi Akiva continues and makes a statement. Hakol Tzafui V'Harishus Nesuna. In 4 words, he captured the question and his perspective. Hakol Tzafui. Everything is foreseen. V'Harishus Nesuna. And yet permission is granted. And as the Rambam explains in his commentary, Pirush HaMishnayos right there, Rabbi Akiva was posing this essential paradox. If everything is foreseen by the creator of the world, and his knowledge is accurate and true, do I really have reshus? Do I really have freedom? Yet the same Rabbi Akiva says, I want you to know, despite the fact that Hakol Tzafu, he sees everything clearly, Harishus Musuma, permission is still granted to the human being to choose his or her path in life. How? How? That Rabbi Akiva doesn't tell us. The Rambam writes, interestingly, in his commentary on Mishnah, only Rabbi Akiva could have made such a statement. Also doesn't explain why, but it took somebody of the stature of Rabbi Akiva to be able to make such a statement. Hakol tzafui v'harishus nesuna. What Rabbi Akiva is saying, obviously, is that Judaism will not back off from 2 fundamental doctrines. On one hand, God knows everything. He is aware of everything, not just afterwards, but in advance. And this idea, of course, saturates the Tanakh. It's filled in the Tanakh and in many statements of our sages, of the Chazal, in Torah Sheba'al Peh, the oral tradition. But let's just take one example out of dozens. Source number 2, Medrash Rabbi, Parsha Chavav, Piska Zayin, in Vayikra. Medrash Rabbi in Leviticus chapter 26. Amar Rabbi Yeshua the Sichrim b'Shem Reb Levi. Melamed Shero HaKadosh Baruch Hu LeMoshe Dor v'Dor v'Shoftov. Hashem, God showed Moshe every generation and its judges. Dor Dor Malach of every generation and its kings. Dor Dor V'Chachama of its sages. Dor Dor Manhig of its leaders. Dor Dor Mishnah of those its viceroys, those who second in command. Dor Dor V'Shoitra of its officers. Dor Dor Parnasav, the community leaders. Dor Dor V'Chaimsav. Dor Dor V'Gazlanov. He even showed Moshe Rabbeinu every thief, every pickpocketer, every ganev. Every crook that you had the mazel to encounter in business, God showed Moshe Rabbeinu, every one. Dor Dor Nevi'av, Ve'eroyu Shaul U'banav Noiflim B'Charef. And he also showed him Shaul and his children, who all fell on the sword, were all killed during their war on Mount Gilboa with the Pelishtim, with the Philistines. Like a Shmaka Maisa, there was a Yid, his name was Reb Baruch Mordechai, the Rav of the city of Babroisk. Reb Baruch Mordechai was from the Talmidim of the Vilna Gaon, and later became one of the great Talmidim and Chasidim of the Baal HaTanya, Rabbi Shnei Zalman of Liadi. He was a very well-known Rav, a unique human being. And in front of his house, there was this eternal puddle that never dried up. You know, some houses have this mazel in front of the house. There's something that just never dries up. And it was there. So a Yid once came to him and said, Rebbe, could you explain to me what's the significance of this puddle? He said, I'll tell you. Chazal say that God showed Moshe Rabbeinu every generation and its leaders, including its rabbis, right? Dor Parnasav, Dor V'Chachamav, everyone. So Moshe Rabbeinu was listening. It really says also about Adam. Hashem showed it to Adam. So Moshe Rabbeinu is listening to God, and then they come to our generation. Moshe says, who'll be the Rav of Babroisk? And God says, Baruch Mordechai. Moshe says, it is a Rav, Fechtu. He spit. It still didn't dry up. Great people don't take themselves that seriously. They take the cause seriously. They don't take themselves so seriously. So he shows the need of the thieves. Omar Lafon of Moshe says, Melech Rishon Sheyamad al Banechi Yedake Becheref. Really? That's a pretty bad omen. The first king of the Jewish people is already going to be killed. The first one, Shaul, is the first king. Omar HaKadosh Baruch Hu Li Atoim, are you coming to me? You're coming to me, go to the Koyanim. Shaul, in his wrath against David, accused an entire city of Noiv, an entire city of Koyanim of supporting his enemy, and he killed them out. They are his prosecutors. Shenemar vayomer Hashem el Moshe moir el hakoyanim bnei Aaron. The Medrash interprets the opening verse of Emor. Speak to the Koyanim. You're worried about Shaul and his children? It's not me. It's the Koyanim who prosecute him because of what he did to them. This is the end of the Medrash. In your next source we have from the Musaf of Rosh Hashanah, the second bracha Zechroinus. Chazal, who coined these phrases, say, you remember everything. Everything is revealed. You remember the entire factory and company. No creature is evaded from you. Everything is revealed and seen by you. You gaze and look to the end of all the generations. So clearly, Judaism embraced this notion that Hashem sees and knows everything. These are just two examples. But now, how about free choice? Perhaps Judaism believes that free choice is a delusion, but really we are compelled to do what we have to do. Do all individuals have free choice about anything? So here we come to the words of the Rambam. The Rambam, Rabbeinu Moshe ben Nachman Maimonides, who was born in the year 1135 in Cordova in Spain, and passed away 69 years later in Egypt. Which day? On the 20th day of Teves, Chav Teves. He was born Erev Pesach, passed away Chav Teves in Egypt, buried in Tiberias. On his tombstone it says, Mi Moshe v'ad Moshe. They come to Moshe, from Moshe to Moshe, from Moshe Rabbeinu to Moshe ben Maimon. There arose nobody like Moshe. And the Rambam was, like, if I could express it this way, a radical believer in free choice. The Rambam discusses it in many of his works, but beginning in Mishnah Torah Yad HaChazaka Hilchos Tshuva, mentioned earlier, source number 4, Rambam Hilchos Tshuva, Perek Hey, Halacha Beis. Let's learn our shtickle Rambam inside. Al Yaver b'machshavtecha davar zeh shoymrim tipshei u'masaylim v'rov gumei b'nei Yisrael. Do not entertain the notion embraced by the foolish people from among the Gentiles and the Golams, the klotzes, among the Jews. Shakadosh Baruch Hu, I don't know why the Goyim get to be called Tipshim and Jews get to be called Golams. Maybe you could figure that out. Shakadosh Baruch Hu goyzer ala adam mitchilas brias eliyas sadik rasha, that God decrees on a person from the beginning of his or her creation his path in life. Ein hadover kain, it's not true. Ela kol adam royul eliyas sadik Moshe Rabbeinu or rasha ki Yerava. Every person is capable of either becoming a tzaddik like Moshe, or a Rasha like Yeravam ben Nevat. You decide to live a wise life or a foolish life. Be compassionate or cruel. To be stingy or to be generous. And the same is true about all other mindsets of a person. You choose them. There's nobody who forces you. Don't blame your mother. Don't blame your father. Don't blame the system. Don't blame the community. Don't even blame your mother-in-law and don't blame your wife. Nobody decrees. Nobody ultimately is holding the reins and pulling you absolutely in one of two ways. Of course, the Rambam says in other places there's what we call predispositions, meaning a person by nature could instinctively gravitate, but nobody's absolutely compelling you that you have to go there, like we have the reins over an animal and we don't let the animal go in the other direction, even though the dog enjoys the food the other way. Every person on his own, with his own mind, gravitates and embraces the path he wants. You should know that this idea is fundamental. It's the pillar of Torah and mitzvahs, meaning it's the pillar of Yiddishkeit. Shenemar, the Pasuk says, Moshe Rabbeinu says in Nitzavim, Re'ei nosati lefonecha sachayim ve'zamaves, uksiv re'ei noichin noisen lefnechem hayom, keloimar, sha'arishuz b'yetchem, v'chol she'yachpetz adam lasas u'maisu b'nei adam, maisu ben toivim ben royim. I give before you life and death, u'bacharta b'chayim, you choose what you want to live, how you want to live. Not just in action, the Rambam says, but even in attitude, in perspective, and to a certain degree in emotion, what he calls deist mindsets. Ilu ha'kel ha'yagoyzer ala adam liyasadik ha'yasha. Ilu ha'yasham davar shamoshech es adam beikir toldasai l'derech min adrochim l'madam min amadoyis l'deya min adeyis l'maisim min amaisim k'moshe boidim milibam hatipshim hoivrei shamayim. You hear his words. If it would be true that God decrees, God writes the script of your life, or there is something else that pulls you, not God, nature, nurture, but there's something that pulls you in a certain direction, or certain ideas, or certain attitudes, or certain mental states, absolutely, or certain actions, like the fools invented. How would God instruct us through all the prophets, do this and don't do this? You tell your child, do this, don't do this. It's irrelevant. No difference. You could tell me to do it. If I'm supposed to do it, I'll do it. If I'm not supposed to do it, I won't do it. Scream, don't scream, command me, punish me. It's irrelevant. It's all predetermined. It's all predetermined from the moment he was created, either by decree or his nature will take him to a place from which he cannot budge. It's impossible for him. So why are you telling anybody to do anything? First of all, it's futile, it's inconsequential, it's valueless. The whole Torah should be deleted. There's no point of Torah. Torah means instruction, guidance, a way to live. It's predetermined. Everyone is just living out their script. There's really no difference. It's just where you ended up. Where you ended up, that's what makes the best out of it. You ended up on Forshay Road, okay, eat and be merry. You ended up somewhere else, try to make the best out of it. There's really no point to turn it. And then the next question. And what's the justice? To penalize, to reward? You're going to punish the lion, you're going to reward the sheep. Everyone is just living out their nature. Will the judge of the whole world be so unjust? Paraphrasing the words of Avram Avinu, the Rambam says, if we believe there's no real free choice. And so, we have two ideas. God knows everything, and you have free choice. And Hashem's knowledge is accurate, and your free choice is authentic. This is what Rabbi Akiva says. Hakol tzafui v'harishus nesuna. All is foreseen, but permission is granted. So now, let's see how some of the great Jewish thinkers and philosophers of the Middle Ages dealt with this problem. The first perspective, which might be shocking to some of us, was advocated by three great Jewish thinkers. Rashbatz, Rabbeinu Shimon ben Semach, Yavitz, Hachosid Yavitz, Rabbi Yosef Yavitz, and Ralbag, Rabbeinu Levi ben Gershom. Both of all these three individuals were known as great Jewish thinkers, as great Jewish philosophers. The first, Rashbatz. Rashbatz, who's also known as the Tashbitz, is the acronym of Rabbeinu Shimon ben Tzemach. He lived in the 15th century. He was born in 1361, born in the 14th century, and passed away 1444, and was one of the greatest rabbis and sages of Algeria. He wrote the famous work Shalos Tshuvas Tashbitz in Halacha, and wrote a commentary on Pirkei Avos and a work on Jewish philosophy known as Magen Avos of the Rashbatz, Rabbeinu Shimon ben Semach. Then you have, a century later, Rabbeinu Yosef Yavitz. He's often known as HaChosid Yavitz, the pious Yavitz. Not to confuse with another Yavitz who lived much later, Rabbeinu Yaakov ben Tzvi. This is the Chosid Yavitz, Rabbi Yosef Yavitz, who was one of the sages, one of the Jews expelled from Spain during the expulsion of 1492. And then moved to Italy, where he passed away a few years later in 1505, also has a commentary on Pirkei Avos. And the third person I'm mentioning is the Ralbag, who's known as one of the seminal Jewish philosophers of the Middle Ages. Ralbag is Rabbeinu Levi ben Gershom, who was born in the 13th century in 1288 and passed away 1344, wrote a famous commentary on Chumash known as Pirush HaRalbag, living in the province in southern France. All three, independent of each other, Rashbatz, Yavitz, and the earliest one, Ralbag, their answer to this dilemma is quite fascinating. And the way they put it is, I think the best way, let me illustrate it with a practical example. The Noshim Tzidkani Yisrael, I'm going to ask you a question. If you leave on the counter in your house a beautiful chocolate mousse cake, and you know your husband is going to come home in a few minutes, is it even a question in your mind whether he's going to eat it or not? So if you know your husband, you know there's no question that he's not going to eat it. If I leave chocolate chip cookies and ice cream on my countertop, and my child comes home, and I know my child, it's not a question in my mind that I know that he's going to eat the chocolate chip cookies and the ice cream. Am I certain? How can I be certain? What if God helped and your husband got a stomach virus? God forbid. Or has some other bug in his stomach? Or what happened if he's on this juicing craze for a few weeks? He decided to consume kale and celery and cucumbers and beets and an apple for entertainment instead of food. It could be he's on the, of course. It could be he came to the shir, he got inspired, he decided he has free choice to lose weight. Do we have free choice to lose weight? And he's on this juicing craze for a few hours. I mean, he'll recover. He'll recover from it. Most men do. Not all, but most. So can I say for sure 100% my child will eat the chocolate chip cookies? Maybe not. I mean, if he was just coming from a birthday party and he had there 130 chocolate chip cookies, as is the good Jewish custom at a Jewish birthday party, he's probably so satiated he won't have them. But it's, so what we'll call it, in all likelihood he's going to have the cookies. And this is what the Yavitz and the Rashbatz and the Ralbag argue about God. They say when we talk about Hashem knowing everything, what it means is he knows the world so well, he knows creatures so well, that in all likelihood he knows exactly what you're going to do. And the Yavitz and the Rashbatz add, and how many people really outwit the script. How many people really have the courage to change their nature? How many people you know who really do things contrary to what their natural disposition gravitate towards? Rashbaz brings a pasuk from Koheles, fascinating pasuk from Koheles to support this. I have to put it in, okay. And the pasuk in Koheles reads, Perek Zayin of Koheles, Oid biksha nafshi v'loi matzasi Adam echad me'elef matzasi v'isha b'cholei oloi matzasi. I was searching for one more thing and I only found 1 of 1,000. He says, what was Shlomo searching for? One person who actually challenges his script. And even though by nature this is what I'm supposed to be, actually goes a different direction, and God says, wow, that was surprising. I didn't pick up on that when you actually didn't eat the chocolate mousse cake. Wow! Somebody once told the brisker of Rabbi Yitzchak Zein Alevi Soloveitchik Zatzal, in the name of Rabbi Yisrael Salanter, Rabbi Yisrael Lipkin, the founder of the Muslim movement. And he said to the brisker of Rabbi Yisrael Salanter says, As schwer zu brechen ein Nieder wie zu sein Aboki b'Shas. It's easier to go through the whole Shas and master it than to challenge one of your midas. So the brisker of characteristically replied without skipping a heart's beat, is an unheben mit de Gringere. If that's the case, let's start with the easier project. Let's start with the easier project. Let him finish Shas and then I'll worry about his midah. But Rabbi Yisrael Salanter's statement, what he was saying is, if I have a good mind, I love learning, I enjoy Gemara, you can learn through Shas. It's not easy, it takes discipline, but to really challenge yourself, if you're an angry guy, to really challenge that, if you're narcissistic and selfish, to really challenge that, if you're melancholy and pessimistic, to really challenge that, if you're angry, to really challenge that, to really work on yourself, the honesty, the vulnerability, the discipline. If you're prone to fight, to create negative energy in the house, to really change that. So the Yavit says, we know most people don't do that. 1 of 1,000 do it. So of course God knows everything. Of course God knows everything. He knows you're going to eat those chocolate chip cookies. How does he know? He knows your genes. He knows your mindset. He knows where you grew up. He knows. Can we surprise? Of course we can surprise, but how often does that happen? How often can you say, wow, that was choice? What can you point at in your own life? Can any one of us sitting here in this room point to one thing in our life and say, this was choice? This was really choice. I was not living out the script. I was surprising myself. I was surprising everybody else. Reminds me, the Balatanya writes in Torah, why is the first Jewish kid named Yitzchak? What does Yitzchak mean? What does Yitzchak mean? A joke, right? What did you think about your mother if she named you a joke? It's not enough that you are a joke. You are a clown. You have to be called up to the Torah as a clown too. Right? And then he names his son Yaakov, which means heel. So it's great. Ya'amoid heel ben joke. So first of all, this is the cause for Jews a sense of humor. We don't have a choice but to have humor because that's our DNA. The first Jew's name was laughter. If you're not going to laugh, how Jewish can you be? But there's something much deeper. What makes humor? What creates humor? What makes people laugh at jokes? You ever thought about it? Surprise. Unexpected. If you heard a joke already this morning, I repeated a joke yesterday in the morning at my shia that my brother, Rahman al-Islam, said the night before. They wanted to kill me. It was mamish like one of the worst crimes. We heard it already. So you heard it. What's with the starb in the head of Nachama? Make the speaker feel good. Laugh as though you never heard it. What's going to happen? What's going to verginst him nicht? You know, one of the embarrassing things in life is you say a joke and nobody laughs. Happens to me all the time. But somebody once told me, said, listen, I'm going to tell you a rule about communication. He said, a joke, you can only use the same joke once a year. They remember jokes for a year. He says, a story, once in 2 years. They remember stories for 2 years. A dvar twice in the same speech. Okay, I got you to laugh. Baruch Hashem. Why did you all laugh now? So the component of all comedy, the chief component is surprise. Unexpected. A twist that nobody anticipated. The punchline. They say the Maisa that there were 3 old Jews who would meet every day in Palm Beach, in Florida. Mitzvah Hashem in a few years, some of you. And they would play golf, of course, one of the Aseres Hadibris, play bridge, drink gin, and spend the afternoon in the country club. And they would say jokes. What do you do when you're drinking gin after a goal? They would say jokes. And this went on for 25 years. You know, you retire at 65. People are living today till 100. So 25 years later, they were still meeting every day. And how many Jewish jokes are there in the world? How many? It's basically, according to my calculations, 200 that are recycled. 50 about wives, another 50 about mothers-in-law, another 50 about lawyers, another 50 about rabbis, another 25 about doctors, another 60 about food, another 20 about religion, whatever. They just, you know, they recycle. So how many, 25 years, they went through all the jokes, so they decided, you know what, instead of bothering everybody and taking up their time by repeating the jokes, every joke they gave a number. And all that you did was said the number, and everyone knew what the joke was, and they laughed. So one guy would scream out, 65, ha ha ha, 23. A 4th Jew joined them one day. He sits down for the game of bridge, and they start, 43, ha ha, 92. And he felt completely out of place. He didn't know the jokes. He didn't understand the associations. And it's very uncomfortable to feel so antisocial and not integrated into the group. So the next day, from a place of cluelessness, he decided he has to do something. So as they were screaming out numbers, he decided he'll take a chance too. And he shouts out, 76! Silence in the room. No laughter, no smiles, no smirks. He says, what's going on? They say it wasn't funny. Yeah, I don't understand. When you scream 43, 59, 102, it's funny. I said 76, it's not funny. They say you got to know how to tell a joke. So it's always about the unexpected. Says the Baal HaTanya in Torah, life is expected. Everything is expected. When we come home, we're expecting a certain response from our spouse. Because we always go back to the filing cabinet. I meet you, I know what type of guy you are. They say, what's the definition of a nudnik? Somebody, you ask him how he is, and he actually tells you. So we expect it. I know what the conversation, I go into my boss for a meeting, I go to my partner for a meeting, I speak to my wife, I speak to my husband, I already know what to expect, and we prepare for that. We psych up for that, positively or negatively, and that's how life works. What's the objective of life? To create jokes. To create unexpected punchlines. To do things that will surprise you, and according to Rambam, Yavitz, and Rashbatz, even surprise. Kevayachol, the Rebbeinu Shalom. So wow, those genes were not going in that direction. This guy, I didn't think his or her story will end up that way. Wow, that's the definition of the first Jew, of the Jew. Kol ha'sheimeya yitzchakli. When somebody hears about your life, say, wow, that was a good joke. And he says that's why Sarah named Yitzchak, because Tzchoik asali Elokim. Elokim made me laugh. What's Elokim? Elokim is the attribute of concealment. Elokim is 86, Aleph Lamed Hey Yud Mem, the same numerology as Hateva, nature. Everything is nature. Cause and effect is just predictable patterns. Elokim allows for the laughter of the universe, for a person to be able to transcend nature. So this is one perspective by these 3 philosophers, fascinating, that the knowledge actually is statistical rather than absolutely accurate. We could speak about God's knowledge in terms of what's likely for the person to do, rather than what is ultimately the choice of the person. Now you can understand that many were quite, I don't know if the word is furious or perturbed by this approach of actually saying that God doesn't know what exactly you're going to do, and you may surprise him, you may shock him. Rabbi writes, I have no problem with that. In philosophical terms, he says, something that didn't happen yet, not knowing it doesn't represent a void. If something didn't happen yet, not knowing it is not a chisorah. There's nothing lacking in you. Not like you'll say, this guy knows everything, but he doesn't know things that don't exist. Okay, of course. So the Rabbi says, you want God to know things that are not, there's nothing to know. If there's nothing to know, it's not a problem if you don't know it. If there's something to know and you don't know it, he says, what do you want? It didn't happen yet. If the man is really going to choose, what do you want from God? This is a classic philosophical idea of Rambam style in the 13th, 14th century in France. Others were very upset. There was one of the great Jewish philosophers was Rabbi Kraskus, who wrote a sefer, a very famous book on Jewish philosophy, Oir Hashem, the light of God. Rabbi Kraskus was from Spain, lived in the 14th century, passed away in 1410. And Rabbi Kraskus says it's impossible to say this, so he goes to the other extreme. God knows everything. God, mamish, knows everything. What about free choice? He toys a lot with the idea of free choice to the extent that he suggests at some point, Rabbi Kraskus suggests at some point that maybe there's no choice. At some point he even says that reward and punishment is maybe just a natural reaction based on what you do. If a splinter goes into your child's hand, you have to take out the splinter. It's not a punishment. It's all it's not real reward and punishment. It's just a process. It's one of the things he suggests, although it's not his conclusion. But it's to such a point that the Barnacle, who's the finance minister of Spain and is one of the Jews who's expelled in 1492, Yitzchak Barnacle, writes about Rabbi Kraskus' proposition that there may not be free choice and God knows everything. Look in your sources. Don Yitzchak Abarbanel Bereishis Yitches V'nivhalti Mirois Harava Chosid Azeh Bereach Meisorev Be'esh Kviras HaMeforshim V'noifel B'Acharoina. I was shocked that Rabbi Chizdoi is running away from the fire of Kfira, of heresy, that God doesn't know everything, and he falls into a new form, a new mistake, that there's no absolute free choice. Even though I read Rabbi Kraskus, and I think he also believes at the end that there's completely free choice, even though God knows everything. What his explanation is, we'll see soon. Now let's come to the Rambam. The Rambam asks this question. The Rambam doesn't only say we believe in free choice, right? We learned before the Rambam in Hilchos Tshuva Perek Hey, he raises this question in your next source, Perek Hey Halacha Hey. And the answer the Rambam gives still perplexes us to this day. Shema Toima, you might say. God knows everything in advance. So before it happens, does he know that this person will be a tzaddik or a rasha, or does he not know? If he knew that the person is going to be righteous, he can't not be righteous. And if you say that he knew the person will be a tzaddik, but really the next day the person can choose the opposite behavior, this means God's knowledge was erroneous, it was mistaken, it was lacking. These are the words of the Rambam, Hilchos Tshuva Perek Hey. Listen to his response. I want you to know. Shetshuvas shayla zu arucha me'eretz midu rechav miniyom v'kam me'ikorim g'dolim ba'arorim ramim tluyim ba. his words. The answer to this question is longer than the earth and wider than the sea. And some of the greatest fundamentals and mountains in Jewish thought depend on the answer to this question. But at least try to understand what I'm going to tell you. And you'll see why the Rambam is telling you to try to understand. Usually he writes things and he hopes you're going to understand, but here he tells you, try to understand what I'm going to tell you. We already explained in the second chapter of Hilchos Yesodei HaTorah. God does not know knowledge and wisdom and information from things outside of himself, like a human being, who the person and the knowledge are two separate things. There is me, there is my brain, and then there's the information my brain obtains from outside that I then assimilate into my cognitive system. God and his knowledge are completely indivisible one. Man cannot understand this well. Just like man cannot define and really understand who is the creator, what is the truth of God, what is God. You can't see me and live. One also cannot comprehend the knowledge of the creator. The prophet says, your thoughts are not mine, your ways are not mine. If this is the case, so therefore we're incapable of knowing how God knows all the creatures and all the actions, because his system, the way God knows, is completely different than the way we know something. But we know for sure that man's behavior is in man's hands, and God does not pull him or decree upon him what to do. And don't think we know it only because of the tradition of religion. But from clear rational proofs, from knowledgeable pathways. And that's why throughout the Tanakh man is judged for his behavior, and this is the fundamental notion upon which the whole Tanakh is based. We are accountable because we are capable. Comes the Derive, Hasagas Derive. The Derive was Rabbeinu Avraham ben David. And we all grow up, those who learn Rambam in Yeshiva or later with Hasagas Derive. There were three Derives in Jewish history. Three Avraham ben Davids. Derive Harishon, Derive Hasheni, Derive Hashni. They all lived in the same time, more or less. But there were three Derives. The Derive who criticizes the Rambam constantly in his Mishnah Torah is the third Derive. Derive Hashish Rabbeinu Avraham ben David, who lived in Pasquires in France. The Rambam passed away in 1205. And the Derive was born 1120 before the Rambam and passed away a few years before the Rambam in 1198, lived in France. He's known as Derive Hashlishi Baal HaSagas. He argues with the Rambam throughout his Mishnah Torah, and sometimes very sharply, as you will see. The Derive is very perturbed by the words of the Rambam. Take a look. He quotes the Rambam, we can't know. Omar Avram, this is how he begins all of his comments. Omar Avram, Avram says, meaning himself, Rabbeinu Avram ben David, Derive. The author did not conduct himself in the tradition of wise people. You don't begin something if you don't know how to finish it. Don't get into a mess that you can't get out of. He begins with questions, and then he finishes with a question. He comes back to faith. Start with a question, and then at the end you tell people, oh, you can't understand, this is what we believe. You know what my policy is? You should have done something. Let it go. Let the innocents believe. What do you have to trigger their curiosity? And then you leave a doubt, you implant a doubt in their mind. And then they may start questioning, really? I guess we don't have free choice. But this is the Derive. He's very upset at their He says, I don't understand. You ask a question, you say, I'm going to now talk to you, and you tell me God's knowledge is a different type of knowledge. We don't know how he knows, and therefore he could know everything in advance, and we could still have free choice, and his knowledge is accurate, and I could still choose, but you don't tell me how that works, so why are you giving me questions and not giving me answers? You want to leave it for a minute, and say we're not going there, we're not dealing with it. Very interesting critique of the Derive on the Rambam. You know the Maisa? You know every shtetl has a ganev, as a thief. So there was once this Rav who was learning at 3 o'clock in the morning, and this thief needed to support his family. So what he did, he was climbing from the chimney, come down into the house, would steal what he needs to steal, and he would go support his family. One night he decided to choose the house of the Rav. His mazel, the Rav was learning at 3 o'clock in the morning. He goes into the chimney, and the chimney happened to come out of the rabbi's study. So the Gana falls into the chimney, comes down, and slips into the rabbi's study. And the poor guy is mamish completely covered with, completely covered with very black and as white, verschmutzt, verhackt. And the Rav was an innocent Jew, Ehrlich, he is sitting and learning Gemara, and suddenly he sees this Jew in front of him who was mamash a miserable ganev. Shalom Aleichem! What brings you to my home at 3 o'clock in the morning? He asks the ganev. The ganev looks at me and says, Rebbe, ich bin gekommen fragen akasha. I came to ask a shaila, I came to ask a question. He says, must be an urgent question. 3 o'clock in the morning. What's the question? He says, the question is, wie kriegt man fundament heraus? How do you get out of this mess? How do you get out of this place? So that's what the Derive says. Wie kriegt man fundament heraus? You create this puzzle, you create this enigma, you create a maze, and then you tell me we can't understand. Okay, so we could have started that way. We could have said we don't understand. This is Derive's problem. And he continues, I admit, there's no good convincing answer for this. It's better to give Epis an answer. This is what I'm going to say. If man's righteousness or anti-righteousness were dependent on God's decree, it would be a problem. His knowledge would exclude choice. עכשיו שהבוירי heiss יזו הממשלה מידי ומסרה ביד האדם עצמי אין ידיעס גזירה אבל היא כידיעס האצטגנים שיודעים מכוח אחר מה יהיו דרכיו של זה. But since Hashem removed his authority from human choice and he gave it, he transferred the power to the human being, his knowledge is not a decree, his knowledge is like astrologists who know future things, not because they decree it, by gazing at the stars. And he finishes with these 4 words, V'chol ze einenu shava. Yet everything I wrote is ultimately worthless. He gives an answer, and he says, V'chol ze einenu shava. What is the Derive's answer in which he's arguing with the Rambam? What is the Derive telling us? And what was the Rambam thinking? Does the Rambam give an answer? Does the Rambam just tell us, I have nothing to tell you? So the Derive says, why are you asking a question? Because we see here 2 perspectives, the Rambam, the Derive. What is really the argument between the Rambam and the Derive? Let's now, for a few moments, discover the most popular answer among the Jewish philosophers over the Middle Ages, and many of them attributed this answer to the Rambam. They believed this is what the Rambam said. And we'll soon see who were the great advocates of this answer, but this is the most popular, and in many ways, it's a simple answer. It's not simple because of a certain problem which we will address, but in many ways it's a simple answer how to reconcile the two pillars of what? Hashem's knowledge and our autonomy. Let me maybe illustrate it with a simple example. You videotape a football game. I know there's a few people who gave up football this morning for this shiur, so I don't want they should feel completely lost. So, well, at least in machshava, I know you can't play football with machshava, but at least on some level, Neshalma Farmas Vaseinu, it's called. You won't lose the calories, but close. You videotape a football game. Or somebody videos a football game, and you're watching it, or somebody's watching it. You know, the Maisa, Drew came to the Rabbi before Yom Kippur. The World Series that year were on the night of Yom Kippur. He says, Rabbi, I never missed a World Series in my life. But it's Kol Nidre, the Rabbi says, Kol Nidre. I don't know what to do. I mean, Kol Nidre is very important, but the World Series, what should I do? The Rabbi looks at him and says, you never heard of a videotape? You videotape and you watch it afterwards. He says, really? I could videotape Kol Nidre? So you videotape the football game and then you're watching it or somebody else is watching it. Now, as you're watching it, you're looking at the game as it's unfolding on the video. You may know for sure what the final score is. You also may know for sure how the plays will develop. The various moves, the various dramatic moments, the various leaps, etc., etc. So you know exactly what the result is going to be. Your knowledge is perfect. It's accurate. There's no mistake. Will anybody say, oh, your knowledge is influencing the players to play a certain way or to make these moves because your knowledge is perfect. It's not mistaken. And therefore, they are bound to follow the script that you know they will follow. So obviously, it's foolish. Why is it foolish? They have free choice of how to play. And they're not following your script. But what do you mean? You know for sure what's going to happen. And that knowledge is absolute. It's impeccable. It's flawless. It can't be mistaken because we know it's really true. So you're looking at me like, what is this guy talking about? They played already, for heaven's sake. They played already. You're watching a video. You know what they're going to do because they did it already. So of course your knowledge doesn't influence their behavior. Your knowledge stems from their behavior. Their behavior doesn't stem from your knowledge. They're not living out the script of it. You're watching a videotape of something that happened. You know the score because it happened already. So therefore, of course, your knowledge is perfect. And of course, their free choice is perfect and your knowledge is not influencing them. So how do we reconcile it? We reconcile it very simply. We say, it happened already. That's why you know it with absolute certainty. You know what they chose. And you know what they chose with absolute certainty. Can we then not say that God is a viewer of the videotape of our everyday lives, knowing the choices that we are going to make, not because he forces us to make them because he knows it accurately, but because he operates in a different dimension of time than we do? And I saw this articulated beautifully and succinctly in a long letter The Lubavitch Rabbi wrote in 1949, Chav Beis Tevis Tovshin Tes, to a Jew whom I actually knew. You knew him too, Rabbi Yisrael Alltime from Pittsburgh, Zechrona Livracha. And I found this letter to him. I put it in the sources because he articulates this idea in very practical terminology. Take a look at the next source. You see the second paragraph of page 2 in your source sheets. Look at the Sichos Chelik Zayin Chav Beis Tevis Tovshin Tes. Here are the words of the Lubavitch Rebbe. Reuven yodeya asidois sheyagid b'negei l'shimon hanimtza b'ktzei tevel ma'asav u'pa'ulosav Sebast. Say Reuven knows the future. He has this uncanny ability to know the future. And he tells you about Shimon, who's on the other side of the world. In parentheses, this is before texts and emails. There's no way Reuven could influence Shimon in any way because he's on the other side of the world. There's no connection. And he tells you what Shimon is going to do tomorrow. You're not going to say that the future, the one who knows the future, his words or knowledge influences the choice of Shimon. Reuven knows that Shimon will freely choose this. What do I mean? What do I mean? It's the choice of Shimon that's creating the knowledge of Reuven, not the knowledge of Reuven that's defining the choice of Shimon. Our problem is, if my knowledge is perfect, tomorrow you can't disprove me. But what if my knowledge is coming from your choice, not the other way around? But 1 second, it's happening a day before. So let's see. The choice is the cause. The knowledge is the effect of the choice, not the cause of the choice. It's mamish like knowing after choice. Are you going to tell me, because I know you came to the shiur this morning, I influenced your decision? I influenced your decision. I mean, maybe I did. But it's ridiculous. I know what you chose, so I influenced it. But my knowledge is accurate. Of course my knowledge is accurate. Once you choose it, my knowledge is accurate. It's perfect, but it has no influence. Nobody's going to say there's a contradiction. The choice was free. It was not influenced by the knowledge. It's exactly the other way around. The reason I know it is because you had a choice. And I know what you chose. This is how Hashem knows. The Gemara says, Yerushalmi Rosh Hashanah Perek Aleph Halacha Gimel, and also the end of Yuma, HaKadosh Baruch Hu Royas HaNoilad. What are the words? Hashem sees that which is being born. What does it mean he sees which is being born? I cannot see that which will be born in a year, in a century, in a millennium. I can't see what's going to be born tomorrow. But if I could see what's going to be born tomorrow, so me knowing what you're going to choose tomorrow is like you knowing what I chose yesterday. Fine. But if the choice is free, how can I know yesterday what you're going to choose today? That's impossible. I could know what you chose today because I observe it. But how can I know what you're going to choose tomorrow? This is what the Rambam said. This is what the Rambam means. Our knowledge is not like God's knowledge, and we don't know how God knows. But our problem is not that knowledge contradicts free choice. Our problem is that we operate in time. So there's past, there's present, and there's future. But if God lives in a different dimension of time or beyond time, or to give an example, imagine past, present, and future are a circle. It's all a circle. And we're living on that circle, on that circumference. So there's past, there's present, there's future. But what about if you're in the center of the circle? And in the center of the circle, there's equal relationship to all parts of the circle. The center of the circle has equal relationship to all parts of the circumference. So if God is the center, so to speak, of that circle, past, present, and future are all in the same dimensions of a relationship to him. So the future is like the past and the present. So the reason he knows it is because I chose it already. I didn't choose it yet. In the human dimension of time, I did not choose it. His knowledge is coming because the future and the present are integrated, and hence he knows what I chose. Who coined this answer? If you look in Pirkei Avos, there's a famous commentary on Pirkei Avos known as the Medrash Shmuel. The Medrash Shmuel was authored by a man named Reb Shmuel D. Uzida. Reb Shmuel B. Uzida was one of the students of the Arizal, passed away in 1604, lived in Sebast, he had a yeshiva in Sebast. He wrote a commentary, Medrash Shmuel. And let's see what he says in Medrash Shmuel. V'achar kach matzasi laharav Reb Moshe al Moshenino zichrona livracha shepirish. I found that after he says his own commentary, which I just articulated in different words, I found that Rabbi Moshe al Moshenino says something very similar, and he's going to quote Rabbi Moshe al Moshenino. Rabbi Moshe lived in the early 1500s in Saloniki, in Greece. He was one of the great philosophers. He was a doctor. He was a commentator. And the Medrash Shmuel, Reb Shmuel B. Uzida, who's a student of the Arizal, who lived just a few decades later, quotes him. Shepirish, he said, Ki zeh hatirutz ba'atzmei kivin ha-Rambam zal. Yoyred lo-oimer kadvarim shel ha-Rambam zal. This answer is really what the Rambam meant. Now look how Rabbi Moshe al Moshenino explains this. Very interesting words in classical terminology of Jewish philosophy. Ki behevdu yidiyasi yizbarach mediyaseinu hitira sofik meikori l'mevinim. By separating God's knowledge from ours, he completely undid the problem. V'him shel Rav Moshe al Moshenino zal mashal bazeh. Reb Moshe al Moshenino from Saloniki gave an example. V'amar, he said, Im ani royes Reuven b'hoive shehu rotz, hine yechuyev sheyiyeh, right? If I'm watching Reuven running, is it a question if he's running? No. Unless I'm suffering from optical illusion, obviously, it's absolutely true that he's running. You can't say he's running and he's not running. Because that would be a paradox. In one person, at one moment, you can be running and not running. Of course, this is before the age of quantum mechanics, where we know that things can happen paradoxically, but not in the 16th century's perception, which will be future classes about how that relates to free choice. Nobody's going to say, oh, he's forced to run. I'm influencing to run. You know why? My knowledge of his running, is it perfect? Yes. Is it accurate? Yes. Can I be mistaken? Absolutely not. That means you're forced to run. Because we know for sure my knowledge is absolute. There's no question that when I say this guy is running, I am not 90% right, I'm 100% right. That means you're forced to run, because if you're not going to run, right, it means I'm wrong. I'm saying he's running. You got to be foolish to say my knowledge is influencing your running. Why? So the answer is, Kiyam sheyasi v'yasi amitis hine pulose hiyavsharis. My knowledge is true, but you're choosing to run. Or to put it differently, the reason I know you're running is because you're choosing to run. Even though God knows what I'm going to do, he doesn't force me. Why? He's watching it happen right now. He's watching me run. He's watching me speak. He's watching me think. He's watching me open the door. He's watching me surfing the web or checking my text messages during a shir. I'm also watching. There's no future by him. He's beyond the time. All times that we speak about in the future, to no end for him are present. So just like by us, our knowledge in the present doesn't influence the other person whom we are observing, his knowledge of our future doesn't influence him because he's watching it. The only reason people got meshuga about this question is simply because we have the inability to imagine that the future should be observed as the present. He says that's the problem. You're getting over the topic with knowledge and free choice. There's no contradiction between the two. Our problem is an issue of dimensions of time. We're comparing God's knowledge to ours, so we have a question. If you know that his knowledge is not subjected to time, even though you don't know how, but when he understands that all future things are by him present to the end of generations, he doesn't have a question. And therefore, our choice remains absolutely free, even though God knows it, because he sees it happening in the present. Yes?
This is where to answer the question that, of course, most of knowledge of what is going to happen in the future.
Yes. Right.
That's all as long as the focus doesn't get involved in influencing day-to-day habits.
Good question. He's saying this is all if God's knowledge is detached. I'm watching you live your life. I'm not forcing you. Is God really so detached? Is his knowledge completely objective, just watching? Or his knowledge constitutes the reality? Very, very good question. In other words, this makes sense if we view God's knowledge not human, but very similar to human in the sense that he's watching somebody else play the game and live their life.
You've already answered it, because he influences where you're born, who your parents are.
No, everyone admits that many things are not subjected to choice. Where I'm born, if I'm born, to whom I'm born. The question is there anything where there is free choice? That's the question. We all know there are things no one thinks there's free choice.
Within the context of where you've been directed, there's free choice. But there's limitations to...
Okay, but that is there even in a certain context? Because where I was born and who I am, doesn't that cause me to go in a certain direction? The way they phrased the question was God's knowledge. Or you can phrase the question as a result of science and genetics and all that, which we will get to. But that's we see here a very clear perspective that comes from the Medrash Shmuel, Reb Moshe Mashinino, yeah? Huh? Did Chava have a choice? That's a wonderful question. Did Chava have a choice? That's the question. That's the question. I mean, the serpent was very persuasive. And did Adam have a choice? Your wife tells you to eat something. Do you really have a choice? Do you really have a choice not to eat it if you want to stay married? And remember, Adam didn't have anybody else. So did he really have a choice? You know what the Balaturim writes, yeah? You know the Balaturim writes? You don't know. Chava gave an Adam a patch. Balaturim says he took a stick and she gave him a frask. Adam was still trying to get back at her. No, what's the answer? Huh? What's a mashal?
The answer.
Reb Moshe Mashinino says that's why the Mishnah says Hakol Tzafui. It doesn't say Hakol Seifa. Hakol Tzafui. It doesn't say he's gazing at everything. Tzafui. He sees it right now. He says Rabbi Akiva answered the question. Hakol Sofui. It's not Hakol Tsoife. He sees the future. Then it forces us. No, Hakol Sofui. All is seen now. I see what you're doing now. I'm not influencing your choice by seeing what you're choosing. God sees it right now, even though in our dimension of time, it's going to happen tomorrow. The truth is, this is probably what Derive meant, that God's knowledge is like astrologists. No? When Derive says God's knowledge is like astrologists, meaning he's not decreeing what we should do. He has a certain power to see the future. So what is Derive really saying? He has a power to see the future. He's not influencing the future. He just sees the future like I could see the present. No, according to this, we completely choose. And in our dimension we choose completely. And even from God's perspective we're choosing. He just sees what we're choosing even before we chose it, because we operate in the circle of past, present, and future. Imagine time as a river. If you want to imagine time as a river, a long river. And I'm swimming in the river. So where I am right now in the river is present. Where I was a moment ago in the river is past. Where I'm going to be, the future in the river is future. What if God has a bird's eye view, right? And he sees the whole river. But he sees the future also as the present now, even though I didn't get there. But he sees if the river itself is the story, and he sees the whole river right now, so he sees what's happening in the next part of the river, even though in my dimension it didn't happen yet because he's beyond time. This is what their explanation is. Still, it's not fully logical because we don't know what that means. But I mean, I see what you're choosing tomorrow, today. How does that happen? But we understand, according to them, what the Rambam was trying to say. The fascinating thing is that the Tosfos Yom Tov, Rabbi Yom Tov Lippmann Heller, the famous rabbi of Krakow of the 17th century, on the Mishnah Pirkei Avos, says that the first one to explain this was Reb Saadia Gaon. And what makes that very significant is because Reb Saadia Gaon is considered one of the first Jewish philosophers. Reb Saadia Gaon lived 200 years before the Rambam. He was the Rosh Yeshiva of Surah of Babylonia, one of the Go'onim. Reb Saadia Gaon passed away in 942, and he has one of the first, if not first, work of Jewish philosophy called Emunos V'Deis, and there he gives this answer, much more cryptic terms and difficult terms, but the Tosfos says already Reb Saadia Gaon 200 years before the Rambam writes what Reb Moshe Mashenino and the Medrash Shmuel and the Derive are articulating, and I quoted here the whole Emunos V'Deis, which you could read on your own, because it's a shtickle long piece, and I'm not sure I have free choice to continue due to the late hour, even though there were a few pieces I still wanted to do today. So we're now going to take a break, and I'm going to encourage you that for the next 2 weeks, till we meet again on Sunday morning, you should make the right choices. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.